There is nothing quite like a Three Things Thursday on the Podcast Daily. It's the best way to send a pop quiz at Berm and find out what exactly is going on in that brain of his this week. He's Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. But before we get into the mental things going on, how are you doing physically? It has been a rough week for you.
It's been a rough month for me, but still not really any better. So I'm just hobbling around. You haven't watched The Penguin yet on HBO. I'm aware of that, but if you see me walking, it's a pretty cool sneak peek at what to expect as Oswald Cobblepot makes his way around Gotham.
So what's your status? We're going to have to wait until 10 a.m. on Saturday to know if you're going to be able to snap pictures when Ohio State plays Purdue or what?
I'm looking into, they have these little like folding stools almost that you can carry that are for like photographers. I may end up having to just buy one. Okay. Or I just stand up and don't move. It's just getting to that point where I need to be. I mean, I can stand as evidenced by like snap judgments and stuff on the Woody Wednesday, but I just can't move quickly. So like, at the end of the game where we all run out into the middle of the field to get photos and stuff, there's just none of that.
All right. Well, that could impact the notebook as well. So definitely keep an eye.
No, just the camera will just be going like this the whole time.
Oh, well, that'll explain it. All right. So that keep an eye on that availability report for Saturday. Again, Ohio State, Purdue, not quite the same high stakes showdown, although the Buckeyes, can't afford to let anything slip. No complacency heading into this November. They are the number 2 team in the country. And that's the first thing. We don't have a college football playoff reaction show, Burn, because we get tired of saying the same thing over and over about Ohio State controlling its own destiny. So is there any other thing that you feel strongly about coming out of the first college football playoff selection committee reveal on Tuesday night? Because we did not talk about it on Wednesday.
No, and I want to be very honest. I don't know where any team is except for Oregon's number 1, Ohio State's number 2, Georgia's number 3, correct?
Yeah.
So, and I believe I saw some complaining on social media that Indiana is still behind Penn State, which I don't know. I guess we're going to find out a whole lot more about Indiana this weekend as they play Michigan. We'll see about how they can handle a team that's actually potentially has the physicality to stand them up at the line of scrimmage. But I don't think Indiana's worse than Penn State. I'm going to just be very honest.
I kind of understand why.
I know they've played nobody. I get it. Yeah. But like, I don't think you reward a loss in that situation.
I get that. But Penn State is still won some games against teams with a pulse. And I don't, if Indiana, what is Indiana's best win? Like Michigan State right now? I mean, I don't know that they have actually.
It's game control. I mean, yes, Penn State has won some games against teams with a pulse, but also Indiana beat Nebraska by 50 points and they beat Michigan State by 37. And Penn State's wins against teams with a pulse are less impressive than that. But again, I think the bottom line is it doesn't matter, and we all know that. But I do think that it will serve as motivation for Indiana this weekend in a game that I think that they could lose. I feel like more comfortable than ever thinking they're going to beat Michigan by like 21 points.
Yeah. So I know that thing number 1 for both of us would be, well, it doesn't matter and you don't need to pay attention to it. Although I do think that there is value to putting those rankings out, and I think maybe a growing understanding that Ohio State being number 2, if they don't win the Big Ten, still means that they're going to have to play as the 5 seed. Like I think most people who are following the podcast daily or follow Ohio State, follow college football on a day-to-day basis, understand that this system is dumb and doesn't make any mathematical sense. But now that you're into November, I think there's probably some people figuring out, oh, well, maybe being number 5 could be better for Ohio State. If you looked at that perspective bracket, which is now, it's unlikely that it would play out exactly like this because for Ohio State to be number 5 would have to lose a game, whether that's a rematch to Oregon or Indiana, perhaps, although maybe they wouldn't be 5 in that spot anyway. But playing in one of those first round games might not be the worst thing in the world if you wind up playing Boise State and BYU in the playoff. And I do think that there's probably some growing realization that when you're saying that this is the number 2 team in the country now, why would they not be rewarded with a bye if that's what the playoff selection committee is supposed to do, is rank the teams, and then you're shuffling them out there and penalizing them for what purpose? To reward conference championships, which shouldn't exist anymore anyway in the expanded playoff era. I guess what I hope is that people are realizing what I thought was going to be the case all along, and this is a very, very, very dumb system.
It is, and to your point, things to break in a way that Ohio State would end up being the 5 seed, it means you'd have to beat Indiana, beat Michigan, and lose to Oregon again in a way that is not, or lose in a similar fashion that you lost to them last time. Because if you go out there and you lose by 14 against Oregon, I don't know that you're going to be given the benefit of the doubt and put into that top spot of the non-conference champions. If you were to lose a game to Indiana, you won't make the Big Ten championship game. So then you're going to end up being 9 or 10 probably instead of 5 anyway, because Indiana and Oregon would flip flop. So the best thing for Ohio State to do is to just win all their games and be the number 1 seed, which I'm not even sure they would be, to be honest. If that comes to fruition, I think they should be, but I do.
They
think
definitely would be. I
don't know. I mean, there's still the intrinsic SEC bias out there that they're going to have to fight through. And as Texas and Georgia end up rematching or something like that, I could see a scenario where the SEC champion still gets the nod because people are just in love with the SEC. But this current Big Ten is in a position right now to potentially have 4 playoff teams. And that's something that people, when you're talking about the totality of this system, 4 Big Ten teams, 4 SEC teams seems like it's going to be the way every year. So for Ohio State, it's about just taking care of business and letting the chips fall where they may. You're going to have to play games no matter what. So obviously you'd prefer an off week in there and to get that first round bye, but who cares? You're going to have to win multiple games and it's going to be a gauntlet no matter what.
So with that fear that you have every year about SEC bias, were you then surprised that Oregon is number 1 and Ohio State checked in at number 2?
No, because Oregon's undefeated and they're the clear-cut number 1 team in the country, and Ohio State was within an eyelash of beating them at Oregon in a game that, again, Ohio State fans and we on the podcast and everywhere else have been going over that game with a fine-tooth comb for a month now. We said it after the game. The national perception of that loss for Ohio State was not anywhere near what the local perception was, or what it meant for Ohio State is, or what it or the spotlight it put Ryan Day under locally did not have any impact on the national perception of that game. So I thought at the time everyone kind of saw Ohio State and Oregon as playing like this is the 2 best teams in the country. Let's see what happens. It's a 1-point game. So the Georgia being 3, like Georgia's being 3rd because they beat Texas, but no one has watched Georgia and been like, oh, that seems super impressive. They're the 3rd best team in the country. But that's the SEC bias that I think is out there, because I can't see how Miami wouldn't be 3rd, to be honest.
Yeah. Just saying that the South can cram it, that's a different show. But like the SEC is not. Once you remove Nick Saban from the equation, like this is not some murderer's row of SEC teams this year. Like I won't go as far as saying they're not good, but they're probably overrated compared to what the perception of them was 5 years ago. That's my opinion. That's not part of a thing that was supposed to. Well, I guess thing number 1 was about the college football playoff selection rankings.
The SEC has a lot of good teams, but all of them have serious flaws. And I think if you look at the Ohio States and Oregons of the world, you see less flaws. So to me, that those 2 being 1 and 2 is not like a surprise.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think Tuesday may well serve as a reminder of is you could have to play them 3 times in this new system. Like if that's, I think, a year ago we brought up that possibility. It's like, hey, maybe that's going to happen with Ohio State and Michigan, and the rivalry gets really watered down by multiple meetings. Sherrone Moore has certainly taken care of that this year. You don't have to worry about seeing it multiple times. But this Oregon-Ohio State feud could well drag out into January. That will be also somewhat reliant on Ohio State's quarterback play, which has become a thing on a Thursday every week for us to talk about Will Howard. And you started the week, Berm, with something that was on your mind. I wanted to save it for a Three Things Thursday, and it is thing number 2. And you have a hot-ish take, I think, on Will Howard coming out of the Penn State game.
And I want to be clear when I say this, that this is not me just slobbering all over Will Howard in a way that I think people will perceive it, because I understand that he has not played perfect football for Ohio State, and that he has made in every game that he's played so far for the Buckeyes a mistake or two that has you shaking your head and going, come on, that can't happen. But I just see more and more of Joe Burrow in his game, like the elusiveness in the pocket, the fire, the calmness, the inability to get truly rattled. The way he throws the ball, like accuracy wise, like that dude inside of 20 yards is as accurate as any Ohio State passer we've seen. I mean, as accurate as CJ Stroud inside of 20 yards. I don't think that he's getting nearly enough credit for being like a really darn good passer that he's turned into, because there's moments where you watch the interception against Penn State where he doesn't see the coverage. And then I watched Joe Burrow throw a pick 6 on Sunday that was telegraphed and like basically a handoff to a defensive back that against the Raiders. So like I think that there's the expectation or the belief that any quarterback is ever going to be perfect is silly. But what we've seen out of Will Howard every week is just really getting better. And again, I said this on Snap Judgments on Tuesday. Like if he's not been X times better as a passer than your expectations were before the season, then your expectations are crazy, because he has been so good inside of that 15 to 25 yard window that I don't think it's getting discussed nearly enough. And some of that's because the Buckeyes offense has been so focused on the success and the wow factor of guys like Jeremiah Smith and Dylan Gabriel getting a lot of attention as a Heisman guy, and other quarterbacks around the country who get more accolades, even though Dylan Gabriel is just as much of a just distributor of the football as Will Howard has turned out to be. Yeah. I just see much more Burrow than I would have ever imagined. Now that physically they're a little different. Obviously, Will's a couple inches taller, but the way he runs, the way he moves in the pocket, his ability to avoid pressure with just those subtle movements, I could not be happier to say that Will Howard is exactly what I thought he would be in the Ohio State offense, because I've said preseason I thought he was like a likely Heisman finalist. I don't know if that'll happen because the offense is just not interested, it seems like, in putting up 50 points a game like Cam Ward is at Miami.
Well, they have to.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, that that is a different system, and the idea of that system is let the quarterback do everything, and Ohio State is not that way. But I just, Will Howard is really good, and I hope people appreciate it.
So I knew that this was going to be a thing we talked about, and I've been thinking about it for the last several days once you mentioned the Joe Burrow comparison. And I was trying to take it, I wanted to find a good comparison for Will Howard, because I spoiler alert, the end result is I don't think that there is a direct comparison for what Will Howard does, because you have to pick and choose parts of other people's games and put it together. We did that even before the preseason, where I thought, well, if you get some version of Cardale Jones and JT Barrett, you're going to be really happy if you're Ohio State. And to some extent, I think that has played out, although Will Howard does not have, a true rocket launcher attached to his right shoulder. Like if the deep balls were executed a little bit differently on Saturday against Penn State, whether that is on Jeremiah Smith for one in some respects, or, if you, a faster decision doesn't need a rocket throw to Carnell Tate on the second. Like, again, that's nitpicking some of that stuff, but at first I was like, well, if we just look at the NFL level, I still think probably Josh Allen is the most apt comparison. And that includes the propensity for some of the mistakes that are made, include the turnovers. And I also watched Josh Allen play a lot of football in college. Those mistakes happen, but the ability, I think, to bounce back from that, the rushing package, the legs, like, I didn't like that it was being made, the comparison between the two, but it is probably still more likely than not the best fit for what Will Howard's doing. But I set that aside because I still don't want to do that. So the questions that came up to, Ryan Day and to Will Howard on Tuesday in the Woody were, is this guy a national championship caliber quarterback? So let's look at who some of those people are. And could you find a comparison for that? Well, Joe Burrow did win one. I don't know that I think that I fully agree with you. I think there are similarities for what you take from Joe Burrow's game and the confidence, the ability to bounce back from mistakes, all that stuff I do think is fitting. I think that the most similar comparison, and people may scoff at this because he was viewed as a generational passing prospect from the moment he signed. I think he's more like Trevor Lawrence because of the accuracy, the size, but especially the intermediate stuff. Again, we can say Trevor Lawrence threw a gorgeous deep ball, was able to stretch the field, and I probably would not be able to argue against that you would take Trevor Lawrence's ability to do that over what Will Howard has done for Ohio State. But like the rest of the total package, the things that you're talking about, moving in the pocket, extending plays, we saw what that, Trevor Lawrence doing that to Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl. I think that might be the guy. And we'll set aside everything he's done with Jacksonville since then. If you get 90% of what people viewed Trevor Lawrence was at Clemson, Ohio State's definitely going to win a national championship. And I don't think that that's that far out of whack for what he's doing.
No, I mean, again, the productivity, the performance, the leadership, everything that he has done for Ohio State to this point. I joked about it a couple weeks ago on our live show, but like at Roosters, the notion heading into the season was like, hey, you can run the quarterback more because A, he's capable of it, and B, the change up, the change of pace, the drop off between Will Howard and Devin Brown or the next guy probably isn't as pronounced as it was with CJ Stroud and his backups or Justin Field and his. And now, like, the idea is cannot get Will Howard hurt. Absolutely cannot get Will Howard hurt. And I think that he has just exceeded anybody's expectation of what he was going to be as a passer so tremendously that the conversation around him and what he means to the offense has completely changed from the start of August to now. And I would imagine it's only going to get better because as he alluded to on Tuesday in his press conference, and as Ryan Day and Chip Kelly both said, like, that run game is going to become more and more a part of what the Buckeyes do, which is smart. You save that till you get to November, and because the weather is going to start to change. You didn't really have him get hit for 2 months, so like now you can start to work in some of that. But also just as a passer, like, I think he has proven, even though you have the inconsistency with the deep ball. But again, I think it's been fine. Like if you go back to that Penn State game, there's that throw to Jeremiah Smith might have been his best throw of the year. The one to Carnell Tate, yeah, maybe you throw that to the inside of the field instead of the outside, probably. But like, he's been fine throwing the deep ball as well, and it's been generally successful for Ohio State when they've tried it this year. But like, I think you're going to start to see the offense as a byproduct of the evolution on the offensive line, like changing a little bit and being more Will Howard centered. And so I'm excited to see where it goes. But he's been tremendous.
And the way that he ran the ball, the way Ohio State used Will Howard on Saturday against Penn State, also with factoring in the mistakes, made me think a little bit of Jalen Hurts as well. But I think that Will Howard's accuracy and decision-making on the short and intermediate throws, everything under 20 yards, has been so much better than what you've ever seen from Jalen Hurts. Like I thought about a bunch of different players. I went all the way back to like Cam Newton, and he doesn't have the otherworldly athleticism of Cam Newton, obviously. But I think that there are parts of a bunch of players' games that you can take and you can see in Will Howard that make him a really unique package. Like, is it going to translate to being a great NFL quarterback? I would say probably not. But is it going to make him someone who, again, was on the fringe of the Heisman conversation and will remain that way as long as Ohio State wins out? Or if Ohio State wins out, like, he's not going to win it, but he's going to be in position to do that. And he's certainly doing enough to, win a national championship for Ohio State with the way he's playing. And that if you remove the 2 or 3 plays, which again, I hate when we have those conversations because they happen. You shouldn't have
can't
to
remove them.
You can't remove them. You can't make that caveat, but like, it's also college football where quarterbacks are not going to play perfect games. And that it's his mentality, which is the Burrow part that you mentioned, that allows him to move on from them so quickly, which I think is important for Ohio State because they will have the firepower to respond in games and they have the defense to complement that. So there is no perfect comparison for him, which I think is also fun and exciting because we don't have to constantly compare him to somebody else.
Let me ask you for your thought here, because Tuesday during the Ryan Day press conference, Bill Rabinowitz from the Columbus Dispatch asked if Ryan Day was confident that Will Howard could win him a national championship. What did you think of Day's response?
I think I'm surprised he didn't say I wouldn't have pursued him last December if I didn't think that potential was there. And I don't know what he would have seen through the 8 games so far that would dissuade him from that notion. If Ryan Day, it's kind of the line of questioning struck me as a little bit odd, and I certainly respect every journalist's ability to and their story ideas, their opinions, their columns. Like I'm not here to evaluate that, but it strikes me as just a strange approach. Like, do you think that they're going to say no? Like, you think Will Howard is going to say he doesn't believe he can win a national championship? Like, I think Will Howard's response was better than Ryan Day's, which is like, well, if I didn't think that, we would have a real problem. Yeah. Like, so
I found that Day kind of filibustered the response in order to get to the point, which was we can win every game that we play with Will Howard, which is what he said. But maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong in your opinion, because we've both been around Ryan Day for the same amount of years now inside of press conferences, but you generally pay more attention in there than I am because I'm running the live stream and stuff like that. But I sometimes feel like when Ryan Day is asked a question that he thinks is either a non-starter type question or just something that he wants to be like, are you serious with that question? Then he just rambles and doesn't really want to answer it directly because he thinks it's an irrelevant and or I don't want to say stupid question, but the timing of that question made zero sense.
Yeah, I mean, especially the week that you're playing Purdue and before you play Northwestern, it doesn't. He just won a championship game. In reality, I mean, it beat the number 3 team on the road while making mistakes. All the things that we've already talked about. Like, why wouldn't Ohio State be confident in what Will Howard can do after what it saw from adverse situations and leading them to a win? And it's not just like the fact that he missed the throws. And I followed up on that with like the 4 plays. Maybe they could have blown him out. And Ryan Day, I thought that's one where he jumped right in. It was like, yes, I agree with what you're saying. I'm gonna and then gonna move on. Don't have to say a ton about it. Correct those things, and Ohio State wins games. But like, they found out the things that they wanted to see on Saturday, and I think that would encourage them rather than worrying about the plays that he didn't make. So I don't know. I agree with what you're saying in your question, and I don't know what else Ohio State could possibly say. Like, they chose him for a reason, and I don't think the 8 games have done anything to make them feel less confident in him.
I agree.
Thing number 3. What is something you saw on Saturday that you can't stop thinking about?
Caden McDonald destroying Penn State center on 3rd down and goal from the 1-yard line, and thinking, hey, that's what that's supposed to look like. And I don't know if it was just a formational / alignment thing because he happened to be just lined up right over the center because Ohio State had 5 down linemen in that situation. I think it's just that play in general where, again, you have out there, CJ Hicks is on the field on that play. Like the way Ohio State has handled itself in goal to go situations and or short yardage situations. And this is not just a this year thing. This has been under Jim Knowles for the most part since he arrived. Like, I don't know that there's one area of the defense that takes on or absorbs Jim Knowles' philosophy more than short yardage, which is that whole if they give you an inch or, we'll defend it thing that he said before. And the ability of Caden McDonald to be disruptive when he's on the field is, and this is not to be a knock on Tyleik Williams or anyone else, but it is different than what those guys bring, than what Ty Hamilton does. That combination of quickness and reaction time and get off is like elite. And I hope that last Saturday pushes that out into the world a bit more, because I do think that he can be a difference maker for Ohio State this year. And I would like to see, and again, I'd like to always reference the Bengals games in these conversations, but the way the Cincinnati had Sam Hubbard and in the backfield as a fullback when they were at 4th and 1 from the goal line, or a 3rd and 1 at the goal line this past weekend against the Raiders, I would like to see the Buckeyes get back to the idea of having Caden McDonald as a lead blocker in those situations, because he's elite.
Now you're speaking my language. He did that in the Cotton Bowl pretty well on the couple snaps that he played out there. Like, it's an interesting idea. They also have, you could use JT Tuimoloau
or Caden Curry, they've got guys, but I just that play to me is such a microcosm of, and we go back to the Michigan State game where the Spartans are driving down early in the game and go for it on 4th and 1 from the 20, and you see the Buckeyes rise up and make the play. But again, I go back to last year. I go to the Notre Dame game and 4th and 1, and Sonny Styles making a play like it. This has just been a consistent theme that, for a team that gets criticized for its lack of toughness, for its lack of physicality, like, you don't continue to make those plays without some severe toughness, without some real desire, because that is a will situation. It is I am willing myself to stop you from getting these 6 inches. And I mean, 6 inches on a football field is nothing. So to not
move the nose of the football and you got it.
Yeah, it really is an impressive thing that the Buckeyes have continued to do. And I know that's being broken down a little bit later on Thursday morning on Buckeye Q. So I think people should be excited to see how that's happening.
Yeah. So too, I snuck in the Davison Igbinosun interception as well to just lump in a full goal line red zone breakdown with Zach Bourne. And because I said it earlier in the week, like, my view is blocked of the corner of the end zone, so I did not see Davison Igbinosun making that play. The thing I can't forget is Kenyatta Jackson pointing the other way, and I was like, why is he pointing over there? I don't understand what's happening. And so since then, I've watched the replay of that interception 150 times, and I can't believe the play that Davison Igbinosun made. And I've talked about IGB a ton throughout this entire year with the penalties, even going into the year. There will be no revisionist history. I thought Jermaine Matthews had a really good chance of supplanting Davison Igbinosun in the starting lineup. I think he may continue to. I think Jermaine Matthews probably still needs to split some more of those reps that he's currently getting with Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun right now, because I think it could help both of them stay fresh while elevating Jermaine Matthews, who seems to be making the most of when he gets on the field. But that's a tangent for another day. But with all that being said, and on the heels of giving up a reception and another penalty for Davison Igbinosun, and the talk of the boxing gloves and all that other stuff from last week, his ability to bounce back and make that play and fight through the contact and make that interception and get a foot down is one of the craziest interceptions that I've seen an Ohio State player make. I don't even know the last one that would compare to it. That was an incredible play in a high leverage situation, in a high stakes game, and big time players make big time plays in big time games. So kudos to Davison Igbinosun. If
you ever think for a moment that these guys, how do I say this? The level of athleticism that these guys possess is so different than the average human being. Like, to be able to be defending the wide receiver, running full speed, heading to the corner of the end zone, not even looking at the quarterback, getting yourself in the way, then realizing in that fraction of a second that the ball is coming your direction, to then grab it, secure it, and get a foot down in this fast of a moment. It's 2 seconds to do all that is absolutely insane. And I think people should appreciate how difficult the job is that those guys do, because we can just we spend so much time focusing on when they don't do something well, but when you do make a play like that, to not really take a minute to appreciate it, it is folly, because it really is remarkable what they're able to accomplish in 2 seconds. Like it all happens in 2 seconds.
Every time I watched it, I also saw something different. Like the throw from Aller was pretty darn good. It goes right over Davison's head. I think it was Harrison Wallace. Like he could have secured it, but like Davison, I was like the 10th viewing. Like he gets stiff armed in the face mask. Like I don't know, 0.2 of a second before the ball arrives. He's getting interfered with on this play, and then continues to fight through it and make the interception. Every time I saw it, I was more impressed. So an unforgettable play. And I think maybe it will, maybe it won't. When we talk last week, we talked about that series and all the insane stuff that we had seen transpire. It might get overshadowed because of the late goal line stand and because it happened into the second quarter. I don't know that I'll ever forget that pick, because I also made sure I didn't by watching it a bunch of times.
Yeah. And it's cool to watch 111,000 people get their heart broken all at once.
Yeah. They had to spend 3 minutes. If they thought it was a touchdown, they had no idea. Even on the reviews they were showing in Beaver Stadium did not really show you that Davison had that football. So,
which is ironic, because for most of the game, all they were showing on the scoreboard was what the replay guy or the scoreboard guy thought was a hold. Or I've never seen anything like that. Have you? Have you ever seen
either.
A scoreboard operator just like try to piss off the crowd?
I'm pretty sure that that's actually against the Big Ten sportsmanship rules, the things that they were doing on Saturday, because nobody else does it, because I think you're not allowed. So that was pretty wild.
Yeah, they seem to be intentionally trying to whip up the crowd into a fervor by showing replays that were either things that weren't called that they thought could have been, or like the 3rd and 9 drop that the Penn State receiver had in the second quarter. Like why are you showing? Like, it was a clear drop, and they're just like just showing it over and over and over. Like, dude, we know what happened.
Well, I bet that doesn't happen in the Horseshoe on Saturday. They won't be showing enough replays to try and bait the officials or whip up the crowd to a frenzy. Although, probably going to need to bring some juice for Ohio State and Purdue Saturday at noon. Running out of chances to see Ohio State in Ohio Stadium. But you get an opportunity against the Boilermakers. It's just 2 days away, because today is a Three Things Thursday. Thanks for joining us. As always, there's Buckeye Q coming later. We'll have Freaky Friday on the Podcast Daily tomorrow as we get close to kickoff for second game in November. He's Berm. I'm Austin. Thanks again for joining us. It's Podcast Daily. We'll see you later.